Hi, I'm Eric Berry from the Starfleet Escape podcast, and you're listening to another great Four-Eyed Radio product. For more shows, check out foureyedradio.com.
Hey there, Eric here from Socially Awkward Studios, and this Four-Eyed Radio presentation is being proudly brought to you by Raven Designs, illustration and design that fit your personality. For samples and inquiries, visit ravencruise.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my word 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello, the name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley, from Cinema on the Rocks, and with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios, and you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. Yes, that's right, this is the podcast where we discuss bondage, James Bondage, 007 Bondage, and today we're going to be discussing the pre-credit sequences. That's right, those little movies before the movies. So, Bond short subjects, if you will.
Yes, the most Bond movies, we'll discuss the very few exceptions as well, but most Bond movies have some exciting little tidbit before the actual main film. On some of them it ties into the rest of the film, some of them it does that more than others, and some it seemingly doesn't have anything to do with the actual film whatsoever, but they're almost always there. And they can really set the mood for the rest of the movie. Sometimes you can tell from the beginning 5 minutes that you're not in for a great time, or sometimes you can tell that this is going to be good. So we're gonna kind of discuss that and see where some of them may have led us astray, thinking, hey, this might be good, and then the rest of the movie may have been a little bit of a letdown, but, we'll get there.
We will indeed, and before we get to that, we also do want to remind you that there is still plenty of time to enter our holiday returns contest.
Yes.
Just go to hermajestiespod.com/contest, and you can see the full rules and qualifications. Basically, what we're asking you to do is think of a Bond movie, any Bond movie. We all love them. That's why we're here. But there's always at least one little thing that we'd like to change. So we want you to pick any one of the Bond movies, pick one thing to change, and tell us all about it. No word limit, no anything. And we will read our favorite entries on our Holiday Returns episode, which will air in January of 2015. And we will pick one of the qualifying entrants at random, so we may not even have to read yours for you to win a 007 prize package, which includes many, many cool items, including one that Eric is lusting after, but he cannot has.
Yes, it's a cool, fun prize pack, including a deck of 50th anniversary James Bond cards, a CD of the 50th anniversary soundtrack album, and
double CD set.
Two CD set, and the coolest bit, the Hot Wheels Aston Martin DB5 Goldfinger edition, and it's just awesome. Tiny little DB5 to play with. It's a fun pack, so go to our contest page at hermajestiespod.com/contest and pop in your entry. It's quick, it's easy, it's a random drawing, so even if we don't agree with what you want to change, it doesn't matter. We're not judging them, we're just picking one at random. So throw in an entry, as long as it's a qualifying entry, you are entered.
Indeed, and those are just the prizes we're telling you about. Ooh. There could be a few extra things thrown in there, too. You have until Surprise American Thanksgiving. That would be the end of the day on Thursday, November 27th, 2014, to enter the contest.
Yes, indeed.
And again, that is hermajestiespod.com/contest. But for now, we're going to go on to this episode, which is our opening acts episode. So, Eric, as you mentioned, there are different types of opening acts. There are the ones that are just little compact short movies that have nothing to do with what's going on, and there are the ones that introduce the story. There are short ones, there are long ones, there are ones that only take place in one compact scene, others that are like 3 little scenes in a row. What do you like best?
Basically, what I look for in a Bond opening, a pre-title sequence, is something that sets the stage for the rest of the film. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly. It doesn't have to be part of the story or a deep part of the story. It can be just a little bit of the story. I would like it to tie in to the rest of the movie in some way, shape, or form. There are a couple that we'll discuss that just don't, but that doesn't necessarily make them bad. But what I look for is something that ties into the movie and sets the tone for what kind of film we're going to be seeing. And it shouldn't be too long. I don't want 15 minutes before the opening titles. That's a bit...
Oh, I know one that's going to be low on your list.
15 minutes before the titles, that's a bit much. That's a bit excessive. There are some that are really, really, really short. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that's not enough. So it really has to walk the line for me for it to be what I would consider good. But I'll give you a little spoiler alert on my list here. I like most of them. Most of the pre-title sequences I enjoyed, even some of which for movies that I didn't necessarily enjoy the movie as much. I did still enjoy the pre-title sequence. So there is that.
All right. Now, as for my part, I'm going to tell you there's going to be hypocrisy all over this list when you hear mine, because I'll give you an explanation now that all of these won't fit. But that's how it goes, because I'm the host. I can do that. And Eric's the host. He can do that. We can do this all we want. But what I tend to look for, I don't mind if it doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the movie, or if it does. But what I want it to be is its own compact story, where if you wanted to, you could pull this out of the movie, present it as a short film, and it would stand alone by itself. I tend to like those very much. They're exciting to me. Again, there are some exceptions out there, but I like it to be a self-contained story. So that's the main thing I look for. And I agree with you that generally I don't want a pre-title sequence. It's going to take up a third of the movie, right, or even a sixth. So...
Yeah, it definitely should be short and sweet, maybe not necessarily too short. There's one on my list that could have been much higher if it had been just a little bit longer. I felt it left me wanting too much. And I mean, granted, it is just the pre-title sequence, so I had a whole movie of more afterwards. But still, when judging just the pre-title sequence, this one I could have taken a little bit more. So it's not very low on my list. I'm not going to say it's low, but it could have been higher, I think.
All right. And, of course, there are, our normal list contains the 23 Eon films and Never Say Never Again. However, our list is going to be 2 films shorter this time because there are 2 films on our normal list candidates that do not have pre-title sequences. The first one, of course, is the first one, Dr. No, where they hadn't decided on using this convention yet. Mm-hmm. They just played the opening credits, and then what people tend to consider the substitute for the pre-title sequence is the quote-unquote 3 blind mice killing of Strangways.
Right.
And I like that scene. I think that it could easily have been a pre-title sequence if they had decided on doing the gun barrel split in between for this first film. I think it would have been a very effective one, and it would have probably rated pretty decently on the list for me. What about for you?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely a fun scene, and had it been pre-title, it would have qualified for the list, and it probably, I'm not going to say that I'd have to actually rate it and put it into my classifications that I use. I went all high-tech again, got my spreadsheet, got my Bondinosity factor, action, drama, whether it's important, whether it fits the rest of the film, whether it was fun, all these different classifications that I took into account before ranking them. But I
of course, made a favorites list. I only used a spreadsheet because it's graph paper.
There you go. No, I like to qualify things, and then, of course, after I make the list, I go through and tweak things, because, of course, there's ties, and then I have to rank the ties within themselves, so that's something that I've got to do myself. But for the most part, everything is subjective anyway, because even the factors that I used to create my ranking system are all subjective factors, so it doesn't really make much of a difference.
And you couldn't even figure in sharks.
I know, no sharks. Although there may be another animal that did get some factoring in. Just saying.
All right.
I love them. So, do you want to go first with your... So we're going to have a list of 22 to 1. So starting with the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, though also, just to give a little lip service to the other one that doesn't qualify, Never Say Never Again, of course, for legal reasons, could not copy the established Bond formula that Eon had used. So what they had is just... they had the opening music playing over first 1 minute worth of tracking shot across some jungle, and then we start going into their opening sequence of James Bond utterly failing to rescue a brainwashed girl. That would not have ranked very high on my list at all had it been included.
Definitely not. Not that Never Say Never Again ever ranks very high on any of my lists, but...
you surprised us once or twice.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of... It has some bright spots. It is still a Bond movie. It is still a Connery flick, so it has its moments. But pre-title sequence, it does not qualify, and its title sequence was kind of lame too, so which we'll talk about in a future episode.
All right, and that will be coming up very soon, by the way. But now let's talk about the opening acts, the pre-credit sequences. Eric, would you like to go first, or would you like to go second?
I can go ahead and fire off. I don't think we're going to have any surprises here at the bottom spot for my list.
I'm going to guess not. I'm going to guess we're probably going to agree down here. We're going to agree at the very top, and then there will be kind of all over the place. That's my guess. And of course, as our regular listeners know, I have no idea what your list is. I'm just basing it on knowing you.
Yep.
So
neither one of us has seen the other's list prior to recording. We're learning about each other's preferences as you are, the listeners, basically. So So my number 22, bottom of the barrel list for me, is of course on Her Majesty's Secret Service. How could it be anything else? You have Lazenby hamming it up. You have Bond breaking the fourth wall, which... I mean, the movie was all downhill from there, and it happened right there in the pre-title sequence. All of this, and not a single mention of chickens. So, it might have gotten bumped. I might have gotten just an extra point or two, which wouldn't have taken it. Looking at the totals here, it was so far below the next one on the list that even had they had a flock of chickens, whatever is it called a flock? I don't know what it's called.
Yes.
Even if they'd have a flock of chickens come through and give me that chickens, then it still wouldn't have worked for me.
All right, I was wrong. We did not agree at the very bottom of the list.
Oh,
but
I'm kind of...
I understand. I completely understand. I am not questioning your judgment at all. But there's just one thing that was even worse. And the reason is that it lost me in the first 10 seconds. Whereas on Her Majesty's Secret Service, I at least made it about half a minute in before the opening pre-title sequence started to lose me. But in the case of Die Another Day, with the stupid CGI surfing sequence, which then, of course, followed Bond getting captured and so on. But the stupid CGI surfing, that killed it. Just right there. Just, you knew it was all going to be crap after that. And you were right as well. Except, of course, for the lovely Miranda Frost. But that opening sequence, which does not include her at all, nor does it include any chickens.
No chickens. And even though you've got water, no sharks either, so...
Yeah, so stupid CGI surfing that took me completely out of the movie inside of 10 seconds is why I have to put Die Another Day at the very bottom at number 22.
All right. Not surprisingly, I'll just jump real quick to my number 21, since it happens to be Die Another Day. I figured this one would be low on your list. I wasn't sure if it was going to be dead last or not. I had a feeling it would be close, though. And yeah, like you said, first of all, the CGI surfing was bad. The action was lackluster, I felt, even though it did have some action and some drama to the opening. You really did get a sense, kind of, I mean, to its credit, you did kind of get a sense of where the rest of the film was going.
To hell in a handbasket.
Exactly. So it's not surprising to me that the two films that we used for our Abomination episode ended up at the two bottom spots on my list, and that was not pre-planned. I did not automatically put them there. That was done with my qualifications for all of these different categories in place, and they ended up, boom, bottom of the list. So it does not surprise me whatsoever. So what beat out Die Another Day for you for your number 21 spot?
Well, just one other thing I want to note in the Die Another Day sequence, because it does, of course, tie completely into their story, such as it is, but you have this very small case of diamonds. Now, I understand that diamonds are expensive, even though they are not the rarest of precious gems. It's just that De Beers has done some very clever monopolistic marketing. But that amount is not enough to pay for everything that you saw happen afterwards. Bullcrap. But anyway.
Especially since they got scattered all over the place. They weren't even...
Yeah, and some were stuck in Zhao's face.
Yeah, exactly.
And they couldn't even get rid of those in the white guy clinic.
Yeah. You think, okay, we could turn you into a white guy, but I'm afraid those diamonds are just stuck in your skin. Yeah, there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
You ever had a really bad splinter? It's kind of like that. You're just going to have to wait and hope that maybe your skin heals it out, but...
It's kind of like Iron Man was screwed until suddenly in Iron Man 3 said, I can go to the doctor, get this taken out. I don't need this thing in my chest, really.
You just ruined your whole identity, Jackwagon. Die Another Day, definitely a weak opening leading into a weak film. So, the one point that it did get a little bit higher than others was I did qualify whether or not the sequences fit the rest of the film, both in theme and quality. And
because it sucked.
Yeah, because it was a sucky beginning to a sucky movie, it did qualify for that particular category. It got a little bit more fun points than On Her Majesty's Secret Service, a tiny bit more Bondinosity points, just because there were gadgets and explosions and fun things happening, even though they weren't very well done. Now I'm wondering, and we'll talk about this not too far down the list, I think. Not too far down the list for me anyway. I don't know about for you. But do you think the opening scene with the surfing would have been a good place for a certain soundtrack edition as a throwback to a previous film?
It would have been better than where it was used. I know what you're talking about, but what would be even better is sharks jumping out, eating everybody, and calling it a day.
And scene. Credits roll. You're like, wait, what just happened here?
Especially if that's where they decided to put Michael Madsen. Or, especially if that's where they decided to put Jinx.
Oh, ouch. Sick burn.
But you're not going to be surprised at my number 21, because all we did was flip places. Mine is, of course, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, for all the reasons you said. George Lazenby hamming it up and breaking the fourth wall, which just... that...
There are some movies where that can work. There are some films and genres and some things where that breaking the fourth wall can work and be effective and funny. Bond movie is not the place for it. It's just not.
No, it's not. And it's also a sterling example of the type of fight choreography or lack thereof, because I consider it more trick photography that I can't stand in many of the early Bond movies, in which the director of this one was the editor who came up with doing it. And that's where I never believe any of the fistfights are real in some of these Bond movies, especially this one, because he's making a pose like he's going to throw a punch, and then the camera cuts and the punch is thrown, and then the camera cuts, and so it's just cuts. It doesn't even look like real action to me.
Right.
And that bothers me, and this opening sequence is loaded with that.
Yep.
So you have the type of fighting that I don't like in the early Bond movies. You have horrible pretend Bond actor, and biggest sin of all, breaking the fourth wall.
Yep.
So that's my number 21. Any further thoughts on our two abominations?
No, just that On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I mean, we've talked about how the movie fit with the book very well, and unfortunately, somehow, even though it fit, they still made it bad. The same thing goes for the opening sequence. You see Tracy walking into the sea, where in the book, you know that she's trying to kill herself. you really don't, unless you know that, unless you've read the book or know the storyline, I would not have gotten that from that opening sequence. I'm thinking, to me it just looks like, oh, she's being a crazy wild spirit and going swimming with her clothes on. That's all it looked like to me. I didn't get the sense that she was in mortal danger. I just thought she was going for a swim, and Bond was like, oh, I got to put a stop to this.
See, I disagree there. I actually do think that it looked like she was committing suicide because she was walking. And that's kind of a classic film suicide image, walking slowly into the water, fully dressed. So that much I caught. But still, the rest of the scene's context was just silly.
Fair enough. So what do you have in the coveted number 20 spot?
In the coveted number 20 spot is a film that rarely makes it this far down for me. Because I really like this film.
Okay.
But it has a bad opening sequence. And it's an opening sequence that was designed with the thought that the actor playing Bond was going to change. And that, therefore, they wanted to have something that tied back to the rest of the series in a way so you could introduce Mr. New Bond as the old Bond. That didn't happen. And it's also a matter of thumbing their nose at somebody in a courtroom battle.
Ah, okay.
Which, of course, means it can only be the death of Blofeld in the opening sequence of For Your Eyes Only.
All right.
Because Blofeld's death, if they're going to do it, deserves so much better.
Right.
And even though they were at a point where they didn't necessarily have the rights to that anymore, because, of course, there's nothing that specifically tells you this is Blofeld. They don't say Blofeld. They don't say Spectre. I mean, you have a bald guy with a white cat. Points for the cat getting away. But, they skirt the line as close as they can. They tell you it's Blofeld without telling you it's Blofeld.
Right.
And then they make him look like such a wimp. They have a throwback line to the French Connection, which is supposed to be funny. It's not. It's the stainless steel one. It's just such a lame death, badly done, and it looks just like a throwaway. If they were going to find a way to resolve the whole Blofeld thing and they couldn't do it right, they should not have done it at all.
Yeah.
And the more I understand about this sequence, the angrier I get at it. I just don't like it. The only thing I like about it is that the cat gets away. So for me, number 20, For Your Eyes Only, The Death of Blofeld.
All right. I will say that it's a little bit higher on my list, but not by a ton. So I'm not questioning your judgment. I agree. The whole thing, and again, this is one of those ones that for me it did not fit with the rest of the film because it doesn't. It just doesn't. There's nothing in that opening sequence that ties into the rest of the movie, other than the fact that we see that. Okay, we got a new Bond. That's about it. That's really all we have.
Yeah, and the fun part is, of course, we don't have a new Bond. They thought Roger Moore was going to give up, but he changed his mind.
So, yeah, exactly. So, it doesn't work on so many levels. So, but there were some that were worse for me a little bit.
And what is your worst at number 20, sir?
So my number 20 is the one that we alluded to in the beginning of the talk when I said some of them were just way too long. This one clocks in at nearly 15 minutes, if not a little bit over, and it could have easily been just the first part, just the first 5-6 minute scene, because they even split it up into several scenes that didn't need to be pre-credit. The one opening scene could have been pre-credit by itself and then moved into brought the rest in afterwards, I think. And that for me is, of course, The World Is Not Enough, where we get basically an entire film's worth of action in the first 15 minutes, but it just feels forced and pushed together. And I think they just went way too overboard with it. I think they tried to put too much before the title, and it wasn't necessary. What did you think about that?
I am not going to question your judgment. We'll be talking about that just a little bit later. But
All right.
I understand your logic completely.
The length just killed it for me. I kept expecting, okay, credits. Come on, credits. And nope. We're getting a boat chase. All right.
See, okay. Size does matter. Sometimes it can be just too big.
Exactly. This one was just way too big. couldn't take it all. So
what do you have at number 19, sir?
At number 19 is one that I was surprised ended up this low on my list because I do quite enjoy the film. It's not, one of my top best films ever, but it is definitely one that I think in the past when we've discussed it is one that fits in well, even though we kind of qualify it as almost being a part two of something as opposed to an independent storyline. But this one I felt was kind of the opposite of The World Is Not Enough, where we didn't get enough. There was not enough story, there was not enough of anything happening. It was just car chase, one line of dialogue, done. And it left me thinking they could have done more with this. It was a fun car chase. I mean, it was not bad. It was interesting, and the final line was fun. But I just it seemed not enough for me. And so that
the world is not enough. We know this.
I feel that my judgment may be being questioned based on your response, but my number 19 is Quantum of Solace. Like I said, I just felt that there was not enough to it. There should have been a little bit something more happen.
I do question your judgment, car guy.
The car chase was fun. I'm not saying it was a bad car chase at all, but it just, for an opening sequence, it just seemed like not enough story. All we really saw was a car chase, and that was it. And I want a little bit more. That's all. Is that too much to ask?
Yes, it is.
Evidently it is.
All right. So I question your judgment, but I don't think you're crazy. I just question your judgment.
All right.
Meanwhile, for my number 19, I'm going on kind of a theme that ties into my last one, which was For Your Eyes Only.
Okay.
And my number 19 features the other death of Blofeld that occurred in a pre-title sequence, and that would be the death of the fake Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever.
Ooh. There may be slight questioning of judgment. Explain yourself, sir.
Because again, it's something you knew could not be the actual death of Blofeld, because it's too quick, it's too easy, it's too lame. In terms of they're not going to do this in a pre-title sequence. On the other hand, it's been done before and it's been done after. Just kind of like, to take another less venerable but still very well-loved franchise, especially for this time of year, Halloween Resurrection. They kill Laurie Strode in the first 15 minutes. Really? But so it is really done sometimes, but in James Bond, you like to think they're going to have more class than that. Obviously, they showed they didn't for Your Eyes Only, but so it's fake, and then the production design, to me, it's just brown. And the shade of brown when you've got diarrhea. And everything, and not just the mud, the whole everything, the room, the clothes, everything is that ass shade of brown. It's just, it looks cheap, boring, and very quickly slapped together. It's lame. That's basically my complaint about it, is it's lame.
All right. Well, we'll discuss that one a little bit more further down the list, because I will admit that one made it a bit higher for me. So we'll get there. I question your judgment slightly.
I kind of figured you would, but
I did enjoy that one. But we'll get there. Oh yeah.
Every time I see that, it's lame. It's just boring, and it doesn't feel like it should if you're supposed to be convinced that this is the death of Blofeld. So that is my number 19. I know you're not going to question my judgment on my number 18.
All right.
And it's a lengthy judgment.
All right.
Far too long of a judgment. And that is, of course, The World Is Not Enough. For all the reasons that you said, it's just way too damn long. And yes, I love that boat chase, but it did not need to be pre-credit. And it was a deliberate decision, because originally the pre-credit sequence was just the banker in Spain, and director decided it wasn't exciting enough. The director, I think, and obviously you think, made a poor decision.
Yes.
Because it feels odd and kind of dumb to have this scene extended until, okay, the first major action set piece. That's what has to be the break. It doesn't. We've shown in other movies that it doesn't. And by stretching it that long, especially in a series where we have been led to expect that after the first sequence is done, we go to credits for one of the few remaining opening title sequence respecting franchises in Hollywood. When we've been led to expect that for decades and it doesn't happen, that's just wrong.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree with you. It's just way, way too long. They could have done just fine with the Banker in Spain sequence as being the cutoff for the opening title. If that had happened, it might have even gone up a few places. Not saying it would have gone very high, but maybe a little more. And if they didn't think there was enough action to it, then they should have written that part with more action. Or maybe had the boat chase happen in Spain. I don't know. I mean, I understand why they didn't, because they wanted to use MI6. But just too long. I agree with you. Too long.
Yeah, it just drug. Kind of like, just like, okay, all right. And then by the time they run the credits, you're like, wait, they didn't, did this not already happen? Like, you feel like it should have already happened. So it's very disconcerting and very, just kind of like, what is going on here? Why is this still on my screen?
Yeah, it's jarring. It really wrecks kind of the Bond movie experience that we're used to. So, yeah, that's why it's at my number 18. The only reason it's not lower are the two abominations at the bottom, of course, and just the lameness with which Blofeld was killed twice, for me. So what do you have at number 18, sir?
So my number 18 is one that I'm wondering if this ranked higher for you, because I know you're a fan of this particular film, especially a fan of the locales in this particular film. But for me, the pre-credit sequence just didn't really do it for me, and that would be the totally tubular snowboarding chase of A View to a Kill.
Dude!
Didn't work for me.
Like, Gordo Lighter is like totally disappointed in you.
Yes, Gordo would have enjoyed it, but I.
Dun, 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 dun. And for those of you who don't get the reference, do listen to our Fun for the Whole Family episode where we discuss James Bond Jr. And spoiler alert, come around Christmas time, we'll be doing that again.
Oh, yeah. But that's right, folks. We are subjecting ourselves to more James Bond Jr. for your enjoyment and entertainment. So you're welcome. The only redeeming factor of that opening title sequence is the little iceberg submarine sex hut that he ends up in at the end.
Gosh, I wonder what movie this is.
That really bumped up the opening title for me a little bit. But yeah.
Bumped up, huh?
Oh, yeah. So for me, A View to a Kill, number 18.
Fair enough. I don't question your judgment. Obviously, it's higher for mine, but I don't think we're going to be waiting very long to discuss this again.
All right. So what do you have then at number 17?
My number 17, it's another one of those where you have two sequences put together where there could have been a split. But in this case, I understand why they didn't split it. I get it. It makes logical sense. It's just that the very first one that we start with, even though it completely establishes the plot of the entire movie, is just lame. Because stealing spaceships in space with Jaws, the space capsule, because it just, splits right open, close it. Just dumb. I, of course, refer to You Only Live Twice. That sequence, even though they used a composite of special effects footage and real space footage. So it's not all fake. Some of it's real. And then they just composited it over, but it's just dumb. And the means by which they're it's just, no. And then, of course, because of the title of the movie, you have to have James Bond getting killed just before the start of the opening credits. So I understand why they put those together this time. And it's not badly done. It's, to me, a little less lame than the two Blofeld deaths, even though it took less effort. But let's face it, if you're going to catch Bond with his pants down, you're going to catch Bond with his pants down. So the idea of him being caught in bed and getting shot that way, that made sense to me. So I'm going to give that a pass as being better than the mud bath or better than the smokestack drop. And I also do have to admit, I like the line that comes from the girl because he's in Afterglow and he's talking about Peking duck, and then she turns around and says, "Darling, I give you very best duck." Not chicken, duck. Yeah. So apparently he loves duck.
Well, chicken doesn't rhyme with the things that I think she wanted it to rhyme with. So, I think I'm going to question your judgment slightly. I think you're going to be I think you're going to question my judgment when we get to this spot on my list. But that's interesting. All right. So you've got that all the way down at number 17, huh?
I do, sir.
All right. Wow. All right. Some judgment questioning early on. That's all right. It's okay. My number 17, not going to be too much judgment questioning here because you've already mentioned this one. And for many of the same reasons. This one makes it far down on my list all the way to 17 because it doesn't really fit with the rest of the film. In fact, it doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the film. You have Dead Blofeld, but not really because they never say who he is. They never show for sure that that's who it is. You're just supposed to accept that it's Blofeld. And all in all, it's a fun little scene where at any other villain, anyone at all, and just random villain or villain's henchman and doing the exact same thing, it would have been a fun opening sequence and probably would have been bumped up, easily 5 or 6 spots on this list. But the fact that they want you to believe it's Blofeld ruins it. So number 17 for me is For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah, I don't question your judgment at all, obviously. It's just, I'm glad the cat escaped.
It was good. I'm not a huge fan of cats, but I never like to see animal cruelty on film, so the cat didn't do anything wrong, as far as we know. Although I know there are rumors out there on the internet, and conspiracy theorists who say that Blofeld's cat was the one actually running the show the entire time, but, we're going to assume that that's just baloney and move on.
Fair enough. So what do you have next, sir?
So that moves us down to number 16 for me. This one, now, it almost got some points because I thought maybe, just maybe, we saw monkeys. Are we going to see some chickens? But we did not. So, Living Daylights, while a fun opening sequence, the lack of chickens and the inclusion of monkeys pushes it down further on my list. So it only made it to number 16. But other than that, we're starting to get into the territory, honestly. I mean, as we point out, we nitpick. We pick at nits here and talk badly about all of the films and everything we don't like about them. But that's because we love them so much. And the same thing goes on with these opening title sequences. Yeah, we're moaning and complaining about the things that we think could have been better, but we only do that because we love the film series so much and just really enjoy it. And we're already, for me, into the territory of opening title sequences that I really did enjoy. Even though we're down at number 16 on a list of 22, I'm not saying that this was a bad opening. I'm just saying that there were others that were better. So number 16 for me is The Living Daylights. And
I agree with your assessment. In fact, with my number 17, we split neatly down the middle of a point where we get to, I actually like the sequence except for the little nit I'm going to pick out of it to rank it where I put it. So, because with You Only Live Twice, the beginning of the opening sequence, I don't like at all. The second part, I told you why I think it's fun. Because, again, Bond getting caught in bed. That makes total sense. And if The World Is Not Enough had put its boat chase after the credits, then that would have been fine. It's just the matter of the length of the thing. So, yeah, we're getting to the point where this is actually good stuff, except for the little nits that we're grabbing. But, yeah, from here on in, I like all of these. So,
all right. So what made it to number, I think we're on 16 on your list, right?
Yep. My number 16 is one that you have already mentioned, and it is an otherwise decent scene that would have ranked higher on the list if not for some idiot in post-production who decided that it would be a really good idea to put a lame-ass rendition of California Girls in the middle of a KGB ski sequence, and that is, of course, A View to a Kill. Because we start off with good stuff, Bond running away from bad guys on skis. This is, signature James Bond. All right, cool. And especially Sex Hut Submarine at the end of the sequence. All right, this is cool. We found our fate into that submarine.
I want to know who designed that. That doesn't seem like Q's design. That seems like Bond himself had to design that submarine. He's like, okay, we need a submarine. It's going to be disguised as an iceberg, so that's cool. It's like, okay, but what about the interior? I'm thinking round bed. What are you thinking? Yeah, you guys good with that? I totally need that for, spy reasons.
You know what it could have been, too? If you remember, at the end of Spy Who Loved Me, the escape capsule had that design. Maybe they just took it and repurposed it.
Some horn dog had a hand in doing that. They're like, okay, well, let's get some room for some controls. We're going to need a periscope. And, don't forget the round bed. Cannot.
And the champagne chiller.
Yes, of course.
And I'm sure there's some place with something with caviar in there.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but it could have been a really good sequence, but because of that really, really lame insert of California Girls, View to a Kill drops all the way down to number 16 for me.
Yeah. That California Girls might have been better on Die Another Day with the surfing.
It would have fit because it was lame anyway.
Exactly. Throw all the lame stuff on one movie and leave the good stuff for the rest of them. How about that?
There you go. So that brings us up to our number 15, and I'll be interested to see if you question my judgment or not.
All right.
Number 15 is one of those where, in theory, it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie that follows. However, if, like us, you have read the book, you'll get that it actually refers to something that Bond talks about in passing as far as what he was doing before the action of the book takes place. So this is the blowing up the heroin lab sequence in Goldfinger.
All right.
And part of why I don't go for it is, you see him swimming up with a duck. What is it with ducks in opening sequences?
They save the chickens for the meat of the film.
Apparently. So he's got this duck on his head as he's swimming across this body of water. We don't know if it's a lake or an ocean or what. And he goes to what looks like an oil storage facility and pops open one of the tanks. And, of course, inside is a extremely lame-looking holdover from the 1950s thing that's supposed to be a heroin lab. And the fact that it looks like this is part of why I'm pushing it down so much, because it's just like, we've got one table with some lab equipment on it and a ton of nitroglycerin that just happens to be lying around. Now, granted, volatile chemicals are used for the manufacture of drugs. We know this. But it doesn't look big enough to be what he's purporting it to be. And even if we're to assume that even half of those oil drums that we're looking at also have labs like this, they're not big enough. So I just would have expected more of the set design. So that kind of knocks it down for me. But other than that, it's not that bad of a sequence. Because, of course, then it blows up. His context says good job. Then he gets into a classic in the back of a nightclub fight involving a belly dancer who is betraying him. And he gets his trademark James Bondism, shocking, after he electrocutes a dude in a bathtub.
That's my note next to this one on my list. Shocking.
Yeah, so it's not a bad sequence, but it's got that one little thing that I'm nitpicking, because like Eric had brought up, we're getting to the point where it's all good stuff now. So there we go. That's my number 15, right. Goldfinger.
I will say that it's higher on my list than 15, but not high enough for me to question your judgment. So we'll discuss it in just a little while. I'm concerned that with my number 15, there may be judgment questioning, because this scene is one that, as I was watching it, I thought I should like it more than I did. It was kind of weird. I was rewatching it and I was like, you know what? I like this film, and I like that this opening scene does tie into the film very well. But one thing I felt it was lacking was, first of all, Bond, in the form of anything other than a wax figure of Bond. And I feel
this one?
Yes, I knew there would be question marks. And this is a good, strong opening scene. Again, we're into the good stuff here. We really are. But I felt that the lack of actual Bond in the opening sequence did bring it down a little bit for me. And so for that reason, mostly, and just, other cheesiness factors, although I did love Knick Knack, the Man with the Golden Guns opening sequence is number 15 for me.
I question your judgment, sir.
Not bad, but for me, just a little bit lower than some of the other ones that come above it.
I question your judgment, sir.
I had a feeling. I know that's probably one of your tops. So we'll see where that goes. We'll see. But for me, 15.
All right. I'll reserve my additional comments for later. So what do you have at number 14, sir?
Number 14 was the opening sequence that basically was filled with, as my note says here, lots of white people getting killed. That's really all that happens in this opening sequence. You see a lot of people getting killed, and yes, it does.
Really,
of course.
Think about a lot of Bond movies. That happens a lot.
It really does.
Of course, it also involves a lot of people of other nationalities.
Yes,
ethnicity getting killed.
Yes, in Live and Let Die, however, it was very, very specific about who was dying, and it was just got to the point where it was kind of annoying. So that, for me, pushed it down a little bit. It's still a fun opening sequence. Again, we're in the good stuff where it's a fun opening sequence. I enjoy the music. I enjoyed the tempo of it. It wasn't too long, wasn't too short. I felt it tied in with the movie very well. But it did set the stage for the amount of racism that we really were going to see in this film. So that's my number 14, Live and Let Die.
It's just close enough that I'm not going to question your judgment, but I'm looking at you funny.
Looking at me sideways? All right.
Yeah, I'm looking at you sideways, thinking, but things that make me go, Now, my number 14, I don't think you're going to question my judgment too badly. I have a sequence which was meant to introduce a new James Bond, which in fact it did. And it's a good concept for a sequence. In terms of the storyboard of the action, it's very cool. And we've already both commented at some point or another about how we like how this particular sequence ends. But there's just enough that's wrong with the opening sequence of The Living Daylights for me to take it down to 14. And for me, what it is we're showing that other 00s are really easy to kill.
Basically, anybody who's not Bond is just dead all the time.
So Bond is supposed to be, yes, he's supposed to be the elite amongst the elite, but the elite he's elite amongst of don't look very elite in this particular sequence. Go ahead, say that fast 10 times. And also, considering that this is filmed during the golden age of action, which is the 1980s, this was kind of half-heartedly done with the camera. It could have been far more exciting, even showing you the exact same stuff that they're showing, than it is. So the cinematography and the action direction, I think, could have been done a little bit better. And I'm kind of disappointed that it's so easy to kill other 00s. And I assume that if you're trying to get a piece of the rock by invading Gibraltar, because that is the Prudential Rock, by the way, I assume that it's going to be a little harder, especially if they know you're coming. So, you're dead! Hey, you're dead! So, there's just enough to knock The Living Daylights down to 14 for me, but it's not bad. I mean, I still enjoy it, but I'm going to nit. So, there we go.
If only I could find a real man.
Better make that 2.
I'm gonna need an hour. Better make that 2. Yeah, it, like you said, that's why it was at number 16 for me. It was not bad, but definitely not the strongest among them. And so yeah, we're really close on that one. Only a couple of spots off.
Yeah. So what's your next one, sir?
So moving to number 13 for me is one that I actually felt was a very strong opening. Unfortunately, it lost points because I don't think the rest of the film was actually as strong as the opening. I thought the opening may have surpassed the film. And not that it was a bad film, but it was kind of heading that direction at this point. And so,
I think I know what it is.
So for me, lucky number 13 is the opening sequence to Tomorrow Never Dies. I felt the opening sequence was pretty strong. It was fun. It had action. It had drama. It had information that was vital to the rest of the film, a little bit anyways. It introduced some of the baddies that we'd be dealing with without revealing the ultimate baddie. So it was a very strong opening. Unfortunately, I don't think the rest of the film really lived up to it. I don't think it was at the same level of quality, so it did lose some points for me for that. It kind of teased you into thinking you were going to see a better film than you ended up seeing, so that's why it ended up at number 13 for me.
Okay. I actually would not have used that as a criteria to knock something down, but I'm not questioning your judgment, but I'm not agreeing with you either.
All right.
And the reason I'm not agreeing with you is my number 13, and again, this is a movie that doesn't often end this far down on one of my lists, but it's one of those where we have two different things happening, but again, I understand why they have two different scenes going on. It's okay. One directly ties us into the plot of the film, and the other one reintroduces us to 007 and to somebody else as well, which could only mean that I am talking about the opening sequence to Moonraker.
Moonraker. Oh, yeah.
So at the beginning, we have the Moonraker being stolen from being transported across the ocean. And of course, as anyone who's seen any of the classic photos knows, the way that you move a space shuttle around is you stick it on the back of a jumbo jet and have the jumbo jet carted around. And that is what they do. So
yeah, absolutely. So I saw a joke one time. It's like, don't tell me you can put the space shuttle on one of those things and you're going to charge me $50 for my luggage because it's 53 pounds. Come on now.
Yeah, no kidding. See, that's why I only do things that don't do that. And I'm not talking about a certain airline because there are other airlines you can get around that. It's just you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So fly smart, ladies and gentlemen. Don't fly Spirit. Never have, never will. But I like, even though it's very basic, very short, very quick, it's still, I like the way that they steal the Moonraker, and it makes sense if you're going to launch a space shuttle off the top of a plane, the plane explodes. Doesn't quite make sense that the Moonraker isn't damaged, but we leave it that way. Okay, fine. And then, of course, we have the sequence of Bond on a plane, and suddenly he's confronted by Jaws! And they have themselves a fight, and they end up having a skydiving match, and we end up with Jaws falling into a circus tent. Which is, it's a fun sequence. It's just there are some that are a lot better, and there are some that are a lot worse. And of course, as we all know from James Bond Jr., when they parodied this particular scene and Jaws fell out of a plane, he did not land into a circus tent. He landed into a coop full of chickens.
Oh, yes, he did.
Because Jaws loves chickens.
Of course. Who doesn't? I mean, come on. The chickens are good.
So that is my number 13 Moonraker.
I'm not going to question your judgment because I don't have it too many places away from you. You know, there were some good moments of it. It's a fun sequence, like you said, and we'll talk about it again in just a little bit.
All right.
So that brings us to the number 12 spot, I believe. And for me, the even dozen spot, well, this could have easily been number 8. I'm just saying. Don't know why, but
gosh.
Also, this one had a lot of fun stuff. First of all, it had chickens, so that gives it some points right away. You also have a fun, tiny folding plane coming out of the car there. That's fun and entertaining, and it's really just a fun, good, solid opening sequence that doesn't tie too heavily into the rest of the film. However, it does, so you know it's got that good balance. I think it's just a good, solid opening sequence. I think, and that, of course, I'm speaking of Octopussy. It's so much fun to say. Say it with me, folks. Octopussy.
Octopussy.
All right.
And say this one with me, folks. I question your judgment, sir.
Oh, had it higher than number 12, did you? All right. Well, that for me is my number 12 because we're really starting to get into the ones that I really, really enjoyed. So I'm not saying it was bad by any stretch of the imagination. There were some that I liked more. So what did you have then at the even dozen spot?
At the even dozen spot, I had one which, when we first decided to do this, and I was, just preliminary, I bet this will go here, this will go here. I thought this would end up higher on the list because it is extremely relevant to the story at hand. It, of course, completely sets it up. And to me, it is a signature, it's the start of a signature moment in the Bond franchise. And it's got solid action. It's an interesting story of what they're doing, but when I watched it, it was just kind of flatly filmed. Well acted, but just flatly filmed, especially, again, since this was made during the golden age of action, when this particular sequence even had been filmed a zillion times, because there are so many movies in the 80s about capturing drug dealers. So I am talking about, at my number 12, License to Kill. The capture of Franz Sanchez, which features not only a chase down the drug dealers, shoot down henchmen, have a fun look at the girl, and then quick leave type thing. Though I did knock down points because she is whipped with the stingray tail from the Hildebrand rarity.
That's I was going to mention that. It's I didn't catch it the first couple of times I watched that film, but when I went back to watch the sequence for this, since we've read those books, I was like, wait a minute, is that supposed to be the stingray thing? All right, now it makes a little more, like I always wondered, like, why is he just carrying this thing around? Like, what the hell is this? Why does he just carry it around? I'm like, seriously. But yeah, it did lose some points for that. That was, I felt, unnecessary. I think it was just, you're just trying to point out how bad this guy is. And
but I don't think you need to. I mean, you've established he's the leader of a drug cartel. Enough. Yeah,
and you're gonna have more time in the movie to set up how mean he is, and I don't know if that was a throwback to like, hey, we'll throw this in here and we'll see who's read the short stories because they'll get this.
Well, they had Milton Crest in this one too, so they were already pulling from that story.
Yeah,
they just didn't have Crest having the whip.
Right. So it threw me off because that kind of took me out of the moment because I was thinking about that instead of thinking about the story, which is why, spoiler alert, mine is only 1 place off of yours. I had my License to Kill at number 11.
Hey!
Might as well just get it out of the way while we're talking about it. For all the reasons you said, it is a good, solid opening. It does lose points for unnecessary cruelty. It just didn't need to, we already knew he was a bad guy. We get it. It's like one of those things like we talked about, you don't have to have the bad guy kick a puppy. We know he's the bad guy. If you have to have your bad guy kick a puppy to tell us he's the bad guy, you're not doing your job telling the story otherwise. But other than that, good solid opening, and really sets the tone for a movie that I feel is kind of underrated in the Bond franchise. Both License to Kill and Living Daylights, I think, kind of get overlooked too often. But there you have it.
But part of the reason that it's all the way at number 12 for me is that even though you have this really good storyboarded action, again, you've seen this filmed, and you have the cruelty where it's not necessary. You don't quite have enough in terms of the actual fight sequence. And so that kind of loses it a bit for me. I like the idea of the utterly impossible James Bond moment where they capture the plane. That was cool. And, of course, parachuting down into the wedding. That's awesome. Bullet hole in the top hat. Awesome. But, it's there's enough wrong with it to put it down in the middle.
Yeah.
But obviously you're not questioning my judgment because you only have it one place higher.
Exactly. So
now, at my number 11, unless you have more to say about License to Kill.
I was just going to ask what your number 11 was.
All right. At my number 11, I have one that is considered by many to be one of the hallmark opening sequences in a 007 movie. In fact, it's been kind of lifted from a little bit in a movie we've already talked about. And it was one of those where we need to save the franchise again because it's faltering a little bit, and we just need something that's going to make people feel good about 007. And it even ties a little bit into the film. It's its own independent short story, and it just ties into a subplot, but it still ties in. And that, of course, is the opening sequence to The Spy Who Loved Me, where James Bond is sleeping with somebody in the Alps, and then, no, England needs me. Skis off, the KGB skis after him, and after an exciting ski chase, he jumps off a cliff with a UK emblem parachute. Not that that's a target or anything. Obviously not, because they didn't shoot him after that. But people in theaters in 1977 cheered when they saw that, because then it's like, okay, they get it, Bond is back, all right. And I get that, and I like the sequence. There's nothing I don't like about this sequence. It's just at this point, there are some that are better for me.
Yes.
So, my number 11, The Spy Who Loved Me.
Not going to question your judgment. Not too far off the mark for me. I do have it a little bit higher, obviously, since I haven't mentioned it yet. But not high enough that I'm going to question your judgment. I agree. And like you said, we're really into the good stuff now. These pre-credit sequences, the reason we're talking about them is because they're so fun and so good. And, really, once we got past the first 4 or 5 on the list, we were into the good stuff already. So, but that does bring us up into our top 10s.
It does indeed.
And so what do you have in your coveted number 10 spot?
In my coveted number 10 spot...
I don't know why that would be coveted either, but...
No, because top 10 is just,
it's more
thing that people do. No. Letterman would start being able to read our list now.
Yes, there you go.
So, but in the number 10 spot, I have one which by one of Eric's criteria technically should be pretty low on his list.
I know.
But it's also one of those where even though James Bond himself doesn't really appear in it, you think he does. And that, of course, can only be from Russia with Love. And that is the quick opening sequence where we have James Bond just skulking through a hedgerow maze, obviously looking for somebody. And, of course, there's obviously someone looking for him, that being Robert Shaw as Red Grant with his coveted garrote watch. And so we just have that quick stalk sequence, and Bond gets killed way too easily. And we're like, what?
Say what?
But, of course, we all know that he pulls back what suddenly is a bad rubber mask, even though it was Sean Connery just a moment ago.
Like, it looked really good when it was on, but then they took it off. It's like, wow.
And we see that it's just a Russian agent training to kill James Bond. And the fact of what it was is so cool that we're seeing this from the KGB or Smersh perspective, or, as we know, in fact, the movie decided, the Spectre perspective. But, you know, from people who've read the book, it was the Smersh perspective. But, okay, from the Spectre perspective. But seeing it from the bad guy's view, that's cool. And I like how they did it. And they didn't overdo it. So that's why it makes it to my number 10.
All right. I will say that I only slightly question your judgment, and I will admit that this is probably one of the biggest points of my own hypocrisy in my list, because when we get to it, we'll discuss that further. But it'll take.
Which is why I had to harp on that, because I hadn't heard it yet, so I knew you were being a hypocrite. We're all hypocrites, folks, as we mentioned.
But no, good solid choice at number 10. Again, we're in the top 10 already, so no bad choices here. There's only one that is really going to be surprising, shocking difference, but I already knew that was going to be the case when I ranked it as low as I did. But we'll see where we go from here. For me, my number 10 is one that you have already mentioned. You had it all the way down to number 15, which is not too far off the mark. This one I just really felt was a good, strong, solid opening. Didn't have a whole lot to do with the rest of the film, but it did set the tone for it. I think that we're getting the cheeky, fun Bond who gets stuff done, but is going to be a little bit funny about it. You're going to get your lines like shocking. It also has an instance of Bond using a girl as a human shield. Once he realizes that she's betraying him. And that, of course, is the opening sequence to Goldfinger. Just a real fun opening. Like I said, doesn't have a whole ton to do with the rest of the film as far as the plot goes, but still good, solid, strong opening, and I quite enjoyed it. And so for that reason, it makes it to my top 10 list at number 10.
All right. And what about your number 9 spot, sir?
For number 9, another one that you've already mentioned. This one, again, fun for all. I mean, and when you discussed it, there was nothing bad to say about it, really. You had this at number 13. That is Moonraker. You have the fun of the skydiving shenanigans with Jaws. You've got the cheekiness of he's on the last leg of his trip. You've got everything you need in a Bond opening sequence. You've got your action, you've got your fun, you've got your jokes, you've got your drama, and it does tie in to the film because you get to see the beginning of the plot to unfold. So just good, solid, strong opening all around. Number 9, Moonraker.
All right. My number 9 is one that you have also already mentioned, and that description also fits. It's a good, strong, solid opening, and really, as you also mentioned, solid than the rest of the movie. I am referring to Tomorrow Never Dies, involving James Bond infiltrating the weapons auction and then showing that he is smarter than the Admiralty, because after they order the launch of a missile, he then points out to them, oh, you're about to hit a nuke. And while that won't cause a nuclear chain reaction, it will dirty up the area for decades. Yep. So,
and make Chernobyl look like a picnic, I believe was the line.
Yes. And the action in it is great. This is the kind of action I would have hoped to have seen in License to Kill for that opening sequence. Yeah. It's filmed very, very well. And even though it's in a confined space of just that one airfield, and it's a small airfield, it's still very, very well done. It's tight, but it's also got lots of room for things to explode, things for Bond to hide behind. You can be clever about things. He's got an airplane that he can play with, and it's just all around good fun. And then you have the, of course, inverted airplane stuff. You have the impossible thing with the ejector seat. Just there's just so much good here. In fact, the only thing I really don't like about it is the introduction of Ricky Jay as Sanjay Gupta, because I consider him one of the lamest henchmen out there. But overall, it's just a solid, good scene, and it fits the criteria I mentioned earlier, where it's also its own compact short story.
Yeah.
So I have no complaints whatsoever about my number 9, Tomorrow Never Dies.
All right. And like I only had that at, we flip-flopped our 9s and 13s. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's a good, strong, solid opening, and like you said, it's for me. There were some that I enjoyed a little bit more, and the fact that it teased me into thinking the rest of the movie might be as good, lost a little points. No fault of the sequence itself, but yeah, that's what happens when we get to make our own lists.
Indeed,
get to choose random criteria to knock stuff down or bump stuff up.
And Eric has no sharks to deal with, so he's totally lost.
Exactly, yeah. I had no shark criteria. Chickens have already been used. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
Now, with that said, my number 8 does use some other animals, and it didn't make it as high on Eric's list. Discussed it already, and that is a bunch of white people getting killed at the beginning of Live and Let Die. But they're either killed in interesting ways, or they're killed in a setting that also introduces us to the villain. Because, of course, we have our kill in the United Nations that introduces us to the villain, because you have the guy getting his basically brain fried out, while you have Dr. Kananga and you have Solitaire sitting there in the room watching. So, nicely done. If that was all that it was that's actually the lamest of the deaths, but you have what for me is one of the most interesting and fun little one-off sequences, and that's the New Orleans jazz funeral.
Yes. And
these are real. They do this in New Orleans. The only thing, in fact, that strikes me as weird about it is at the beginning of the jazz funeral, the street is empty except for our victim and the guy who's going to kill him. And then immediately after he dies, suddenly the street's loaded. It's packed. It's kind of like you'd expect to have in New Orleans. So that it's kind of like...
It makes you think a lot of people were in on killing that one particular guy.
Which, of course, Ian Fleming would be totally cool with, because, of course, all quote-unquote Negroes work for Mr. Big. But we won't go there again. But just that sequence is so much fun for me. I really enjoy watching it. And even though you know it's coming, because you have this one lone white guy looking like a stiff, and he's watching this jazz funeral, and this little black guy comes up next to him. You know he's dead. You just know it. And you even know how it's going to happen, because you're sure it has to be a knife. What else could it be? And then the trick coffin, I like that. It's just such a fun sequence for me that I can't knock it. And then, of course, you have the voodoo sacrifice, which involves snakes. And that also, I think, is vital to show you. All of these show the different cultural aspects of the film, because you have your straight-laced stuff at the UN. You have our New Orleans culture, which is also prominent in the film, showing up at the jazz funeral. And then you have our hokey voodoo stuff. And the voodoo sequence doesn't take too long, but it does just enough to show you what we're going to be dealing with here. And all of it's well filmed, and because they're all so short, I don't mind that it's 3 sequences in a row. The world is not enough.
Yeah.
Not that problem. So, yeah, I have so much fun with this sequence. I had to have it at number 8.
Yeah. No, and I don't disagree with any of your reasoning. That's why I didn't have it that far away, only at number 14. So, again, we're talking about the good stuff. So, hey, why not? So that works out.
All right.
Now, for me, number 8, I am afraid that you might, even though we're already up into the top 10, I'm slightly worried that you might be questioning my judgment on this one, because this was one that I thought might end up at the top of your list, and especially since you thought we would be at the top of our list, I don't know if this is going to be a shock or not. This opening sequence was fantastic. It was a great opening sequence. It told just enough of the story. It didn't really tie too much into the rest of the movie necessarily, but it did a perfect job of introducing a new Bond to us in such a way to really kind of tell us that, hey, this guy's going to be dark.
Not only do I question your judgment, I'm wondering where Eric is.
No, this is a fantastic movie, fantastic opening. I felt that this one was almost too short. This one, it left me hanging a little bit. I thought that maybe we could have just had just a little bit more. But for me, Casino Royale, the opening sequence, even though it's only a couple of minutes, it's literally bang, bang, bang. It's full of action. It's very, very interesting because you get to see kind of the process. You're being told, basically, you're essentially being told that they're hitting the reboot switch without being a hard reboot. They are still kind of hitting the reboot switch on the franchise because.
What do you mean not a hard reboot? They started the character over.
Well, yeah, exactly, but there's still. It's tough for me to call it a hard reboot when they kept
nothing that happened before is considered to have happened anymore.
Exactly. So it is a reboot, but at the same time,
that's hard.
They kept Judi Dench, and they kept. For me, it felt like they want to have that switch there, but they also want to kind of keep things tied in. That's why you have the same opening sequence type of thing. You have the gun barrels. It's still tied in, and I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, for me, I think it made it all the way down to number 8 for me because I just felt it was a little too short, too quick almost. But I really did enjoy it, and that's Casino Royale at number 8 for me. And my judgment is being questioned, I can tell.
I don't even know you, sir.
Wow, that's harsh. That's harsh. But we're talking about good stuff here, and this is not like low on my list.
Wow. So, while I recover from this, what do you have in the coveted number 007 spot, sir?
This one is
if you're Eric.
This is the one where I feel I questioned your judgment slightly, and I feel you are going to question mine because I have this much higher than you did. One that you've already mentioned quite a ways back, and that is one which features Blofeld's death, although we all know it's not actually Blofeld's death. It can't be. It's just like when Bond dies in an opening sequence. We know it's not really him, or he's gonna come back. There's gonna be something going on. But the opening sequence to Diamonds Are Forever, I felt was a very fun opening sequence. I do agree the colors were a bit drab. Honestly, the entire film, I didn't really dig the set design, I think, in most of the film, but it's still a great film.
But that's another thing. The rest of the film is so garish, and you start with this baby's Hershey explosion. It's just...
Yes, the brown was a little overkill, but I think they were trying to tell a story with that. Even they're trying to show the difference between the dark evil lair and then the front that he's putting up of this casino and all the garishness of it. But I really did enjoy this opening sequence. I thought it was fun, entertaining, told a story, fit in with the rest of the film, and just in general, I dug it quite a bit, enough for it to make my number 7, my coveted 007 position. All of the positions on our list are coveted, even the bottom. I'm just going to say that now.
Well, let's face it. 007 is probably good in any position.
Oh. So, now that my judgment has been questioned, my authenticity as Eric has been questioned, what do you have at your number 007 position?
At my number 007 position, we have a sequence that ends up with one of the classic James Bond gadgets, and also a revisit to another very classic James Bond item. And at that point, I've already given away the store as to what it has to be, and that is Thunderball. And that involves a French colonel whom 007 was going after faking his own death, and Bond catches it. And the colonel's stupid. He attends his own funeral.
But at least he was in disguise.
Yes, he's in drag, and it's pretty awful drag. But the way Bond catches him, which just tells you when this was made, is that he opens the door for himself. You know what? Women open doors for themselves. They even did it in the 60s. But apparently she wasn't supposed to. So, and by certain codes of conduct, that's true. Outdated codes of conduct, and questionably outdated even in the 60s. But so he catches the colonel. They have a pretty interesting fight inside of his chateau, like it. And then there's a wonderful moment of Bond being Bond and allowing himself to be further caught and had to be chased by more henchmen, because after he kills the colonel, he kills him, sets him kind of in the fireplace, and takes a moment to pause and throw flowers on the corpse. which is just enough time for then the Colonel's bodyguards to break into the door and find him.
Yeah.
But then, jetpack!
Heck yeah. Yes, the jetpack is fantastic. Fantastic use of fun gadgets, and and we get to see the DB5 again. So,
and the DB5 gets used even.
Yep.
Because you have the bulletproof screen and the spray out the back. So lots and lots of Bondy necessity here. This is a great sequence. And realistically, I could have put it higher. At this point, you have from 7 up to 1, whatever number we're at, anything could have moved 4 places. Mm-hmm. So there's just so much good stuff here. So my number 007 is Thunderball.
All right. Well, as you may have noticed, I have not mentioned Thunderball yet, so I don't question your judgment too much. I have to at least be within 6 places of you. Not giving away anything, but... So that brings us to number 6.
Yep, and I think you are going to severely question my judgment because I questioned yours.
Yes, there are a few spots low on my list that haven't been filled in by you yet. So I'm curious as to where they're going to be going.
And I was I can't say that I question that you didn't have it in your top 7, but with how low you had it, especially being a car guy, man. I mean. The opening sequence to Quantum of Solace is one of the most fun car chases in the franchise. It's just cool. He's racing first through narrow, tight highways of Italy. Then we've got the quarry sequence. We've got some really great stuff with things going over cliffs, rolling into the middle of the road, and so on. You've got gun battles. His car gets torn to crap, and he's still driving it. And then you end up, and had it not been the fact that Mr. White was in the trunk, it would have gone down. But because it's Mr. White in the trunk, so then you're still taking care of the business from the previous movie. And then Bond just very calmly, it's time to get out. It's just, I like that. It's fun. It's exciting. It's tying me back to what I thought was a great movie before and promising great stuff for this movie. It lied a little bit, but not totally. But it also tells a coherent beginning, middle, end story. We're starting the chase. We get all the way through it. We reach our objective. Yay! Entire act finished. Self-contained short story. So this is a fun sequence. So I love it. So number 6, Quantum of Solace.
And I did have that one quite a bit lower, and mostly for me it was because I didn't necessarily feel the completeness of the story. I felt it was just a pre-credit car chase, which tons of movies have done. It didn't feel Bond enough to me. And I mean, the very end, when he opens the trunk and there's the dude inside, and he's like, it's time to get out. It's like, okay, the fact that he was doing all that with a guy stuffed in the trunk, that makes it a little bit more Bondy. But for me, it just wasn't enough. But I'm not saying it was bad at all. It was a really fun scene, just based on the criteria that I kind of used. It ended up being, I just felt there were others that were stronger in total, if that makes any sense. But either way, that's why we have 2 hosts.
Indeed.
So for me, my number 6 was one that you've already mentioned. You didn't have it too far down on your list, so we're not talking about any crazy low points here. I think it's kind of interesting, though, that we did flip-flop. My 19 was your 6, and your 19 was my 7. So came real close there to flipping those 2 questionable judgments. But my number 6 was only at your number 11, and this was just a very, very strong opening for me, a fun opening. You have your funny jokes, you have your pull out at once, you've got your gadgets, you've got a watch that spits out messages, even though it looks like cheesy label maker messages. It's still kind of fun to see.
Watch by Dymo.
And you have a funky disco ski chase scene. For me, The Spy Who Loved Me had a little bit of everything. It was fantastic, fun, really set the tone, I think, for the film. And so that's my number 6, The Spy Who Loved Me.
All right. That breaks us into our coveted top 5. So, what do you have breaking the mold at number 5?
Number 5, I have one that, for me, was not nearly as bad as you made it out to be, and I think maybe some of it has to do with the fact that maybe looking at my top 5 list here, maybe I like seeing Bond die in the opening sequence, even though we know that he's not going to be dead. But for me, this one had spaceships, even though they were cheesy. cheesy. It had Bond having some sexy time, racist style, as he does. And it featured a dead James Bond. So for me, You Only Live Twice hits that coveted number 5 spot, even though it was all the way down at number 17 for you. I just felt it was fun. It was entertaining. I had a good time watching it. Number 5.
She just give you very best duck.
I have my notes indicate Bond sexy time racism.
Wow, but I understand, but it's just
so
this,
Bond.
If it had just been Bond in the bedroom, I mean, if we had not had the spaceships at all and just Bond in the bedroom, it probably would have ranked higher for me. Not this high, but higher. Because, like I said before, if you're going to catch Bond with his pants down, you're going to catch with his pants down. But that spaceship capture sequence is just so lame. I mean, it's Roger Corman lame. So that's why I had to have it so far down. Now, with that said, at my number 5, speaking of questioning judgments, and I'm actually surprised that it ended up this low on the list for me. But that's just because of how good the 4 above it are. And that is one of the signature moments from a James Bond opening sequence, even though it only features James Bond as a wax dummy. That would be the shooting gallery sequence from The Man with the Golden Gun, which is possibly the best scene in the whole movie.
It is a very fun opening scene. It really is. Like I said, even though I had it at number 15, it's still, we're in the good stuff there. So I'm not going to question your judgment. I understand. I had a feeling it was going to be much higher on your list than mine. When I placed it and I realized how low it was, I had a feeling you were going to have it higher.
It's a lot of fun. It's a wonderful introduction to our major villain and also to his cast of characters who surround him. And yeah, there's some cheese there, but it's some really fun cheese. And it's cheese that makes sense in the context of this villain. And it's presented in such a way of, okay, the villain, in order to keep himself sharp, has a running agreement with his henchman that his henchman hires people to kill him as exercise. And that's just a great concept. I love it. And it's also an interesting point of speculation where, of course, you have our American Hood brought in, and it may or may not be a character from Diamonds Are Forever. We're never told. It's the same actor, and they were both cheesy hoods. I kind of think it's just a coincidence, but hey, if it's not, it's still kind of fun. And I love it when he apologizes to the statue of Al Capone. That's just hilarious. So for me, for pure fun and for introducing an awesome villain, number 5, The Man with the Golden Gun.
All right. Yeah, like I said, still a fun sequence. Not going to question your judgment, but just a little bit lower for me because I did like some of these other ones so much more. But good choice.
Now, my number 4, I suspect you will be questioning my judgment, even though we're at number 4.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I know that something else is not somewhere else, right. I now wonder if this is where something else is. So, my number 4, featuring Eric's favorite theme, apparently, of the death of 007, is Skyfall.
I cannot question your judgment in even the slightest little bit.
Really?
Not even a little bit. In fact, I believe we found our first and possibly only dead-on match.
Wow!
That is my number 4 as well. And yeah, like you said, it fits into the theme of my top 5 with the dead Bond. But tell me why you like it.
One, you're in one of the iconic locations of the James Bond franchise, Istanbul, which is a crossroads of so many cultures and politics. It's just a classic espionage location. We'll be discussing those in a later episode, by the way, so be ready for some thrills there. Little foreshadowing. Mm-hmm. But so you have one of the great locations, and you have a great use of the location. And you have such a marvelous use of the location that some people were protesting the desecration of the bazaar, even though it didn't actually happen. But they made it look so good that it looked like they were. And so you have the chase through the bazaar. You also have a wonderful view as they're going across the rooftops where you have just a great shot of the Hagia Sophia, which is one of the great pieces of architecture in human history. That is, of course, the great Byzantine church, which was later converted to a mosque that has the 4 minarets on the outside. Just gorgeous building. And one of the signature monuments of the world. And so you have that there. You have the fun sequence on the train with Eric's favorite VW Beetles getting knocked over. And just the great use of the backhoe. And Bond gets shot in such a dramatic gut punch of a moment that it's just a wonderful sequence all around. And I can't say anything bad about it, which tells you that the only reason that it's this far down on my list is I have so much good to say about the rest. So that's my number 4, Skyfall. What about your thoughts on Skyfall?
Yeah, again, it fell at number 4 on my list as well. You've got just everything you'd want in an opening sequence. It's not too long. It's long enough without being too long. It doesn't feel long because it's action-packed. You've got the bike chase, you've got the car chase, you've got the train fight, you've got the backhoe and the bugs getting knocked over all over the place. And then you see that kind of coldness from M that, yes, she cares for Bond, but at the same time, she's all business. She wants the job to get done first and foremost. You see a couple of moments of M being just very, very cold, and you can tell she's you can see a little bit of a change in her as far as she's more focused on the mission than really we've ever seen her.
Yeah, she's cold as ice. She's willing to sacrifice her Bond.
She really is. And the other agent as well, who she tells to leave. And so you do get that sense of drama, and you know something's going on with M in this film. I mean, you already know just from this short sequence that M's going to play a major role in this film, and that it's going to be awesome. So really, there's nothing bad about this opening sequence. It is very fun, very fantastic, and very deserving to be amongst the top of the list.
All right. So that is our mutual number 4 of Skyfall.
So far, the only spot-on match.
Which kind of surprises me. Actually, not kind of. It really surprises me. And it also surprises me that you had it at number 4. I honestly thought that this was going to crack your top 3. Whereas at this point, there's only one that I expected to be in your top 3, and now I think I know where it's going to be, but we'll see, because now you're going to reveal your number 3.
At number 3 is one where you have everything I could possibly ask for in a Bond opening sequence. You've got a bad guy in a dress. You got a jetpack. You've got the DB5. Everything you could possibly want in a Bond opening sequence is packed into one tight little package that is awesome and fantastic. And of course, I have to be talking about Thunderball.
Yeah, it's just good. The only thing it's missing is sharks.
Or chickens. I would have accepted chickens or sharks, but it might have been number 2 or number 1 with one of those inclusions. But the jetpack more than makes up for it in my mind. Pushes it all the way to number 3. Gotta love the jetpack. That's just so much fun. It's so Bond, especially that era Bond. It's like, yes, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a fun film right here.
Yeah, and it's also, as I mentioned way back when we discussed it early on in our podcasting, over a year ago, you can tell Connery is the most relaxed he ever was or ever would be as Bond in this movie. And that shows up right away in the opening sequence. So it's Connery hitting his groove. So, yeah, awesome opening for Thunderball.
All right. So what cracks the top 3 for you?
Top 3 is something that I questioned your judgment about, because this is considered, even by people who otherwise don't like this particular guy playing Bond, it's still considered by so many people, including me, obviously, one of the most fun opening sequences ever. And it combines everything. It's got action, it's got fun, it's got humor, it's got gadgetry, it's got chickens. It's got a plane that fits into a horse's ass. Yes, we can only be talking about Octopussy.
Octopussy.
A film where the opening sequence is so fun that it features prominently on the poster art. It's just a great opening sequence. This is golden age 80s action turned into Bond done right. And it also has one of those rare moments of James Bond, Western intelligence agent, fighting the communists. In fact, Fidel Castro, or at least somebody playing Fidel Castro, of course, makes a cameo in this particular sequence. So this is Bond versus the commies. That's something you never see in the movies. And so you get all of these little bits of goodness just all put together in one nice little package. I mean, really, all you could ask for was a shark. That's all that's missing.
Had the chickens, so yeah, all you need is a shark. It's a good, strong, solid opening sequence. That's why it definitely was in my top half. Some of these other ones I liked so much better, so that's why it was down a little bit for me. But I can't really question your judgment. I definitely don't question your reasonings. So good, solid opening sequence.
Fill her up, please.
Yeah, I want to see them put 87 octane in a plane and actually fly away. I don't think that's happening, but all right.
Yeah, with signs in English in a gas station where it should be in Spanish.
Oops. Oh, well. So that brings us up to the top 2 spots for both of us. Should we flip-flop them? Because obviously I know the 2 that haven't been mentioned by you, and you know the 2 that haven't been mentioned by me. So I guess we could flip them around and go 1 to 2.
I think we can do that, and I think you're going to be the only surprise. You're the only one I'm drum rolling for here.
You're not sure in which order they fall. The last
I'm pretty sure I know which order they fall.
I'm pretty sure you're correct. So for me, my number 1, which fans of the show are not going to be surprised by this because this film often tops my lists, or at least comes close to it in many, many different categories. And that, of course, is the all-around awesomeness of the opening sequence to GoldenEye. Fantastic introduction to a new Bond, especially bringing him back after a long break. You get action, you get gadgets, you get drama, you get something that ties into the rest of the film. Just all-around awesomeness. I mean, even the parts that should be cheesy and just bad aren't. Like, I even buy him doing the bike jump off of the thing and skydiving into the plane. I buy it. I get it. It's okay. It's like, logically speaking, I shouldn't be okay with this. But in reality, I dig it. I love that opening sequence. I thought it was fantastic, and it really set the tone for what I think was a great movie as well. Just all-around awesomeness, plus Sean Bean. Can't go wrong. GoldenEye.
And that makes my number 2 spot, but just barely, because as you said, this is an all-around awesome sequence. A great short movie in and of itself, and it also ties in very well to the movie that we're going to see later. Great introduction to a new Bond. A couple of great impossible stunts, including a world record-setting bungee jump off the dam. You've got that impossible bike jump into the plane, which is what Bond fans really were hoping for, because Bond had been gone for 6 years at this point, and they wanted fun Bond, and you got fun Bond along with all this seriousness.
Yep.
James Bond introduces himself in a bathroom stall.
Upside down.
And then my favorite part of this entire sequence is when they're inside the chemical weapons factory, Bond's been confronted, and then he has the cart full of chemical weapons. Walks behind it, squeak, 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 squeak. And the general is just looking at him with this just totally amused look on his face, which is not out of character for him and doesn't even seem wrong in any context. And then when the dumbass Russian, conscript tries to shoot anyway, General just turns around and shoots him in the head. Because, of course, he doesn't want chemical weapons killing them all.
Yeah.
So then, squeak, 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 squeak. It's a fun sequence. It's just awesomeness in a bunch of cans. So I totally understand why this is your number 1. I thought that we were going to agree on this one, though, because I thought your number 1 was going to be my number 1. But, of course, I questioned your judgment severely.
It was only 7 spots off. Only 007 spots off. Come on now.
Because, of course, my number 1 is how 007 became 007. The fantastic opening sequence to Casino Royale, where you have, the really great artistic choice to shoot it in black and white. I thought that's what really propelled it as far as this has to be number 1 for me, because along with the introduction not only of a new Bond, but of Bond as a brand new character totally. It's just a very well-conceived moment. The stark black and white was a great choice. It gives you a feel of classic espionage film, even though it's in a very modern setting. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's obviously high-definition photography in a very modern building. And you have the combination of the calm assassination of the turncoat agent along with that great fight in the bathroom.
Yeah.
It's just really, really well done all around. So I couldn't possibly have thought of anything else at number one until you shocked me.
No, I agree. It was very, very fun, very, very strong. For me, it was just a little too short, and that I kept thinking about others that, it did start near the top of my list, if not at the top. And then as I factored in other films and other opening sequences that I just felt like I got more enjoyment out of in total, it kind of moved it down a little bit. But no, again, once we got especially into the top 10, we're talking about the best of the best. And so I agree. It was a fantastic opening sequence. There were just 7 others that I liked more.
I don't think it was too short, because I think anything more would have belabored the point. I think it told exactly what it needed to. And I also like how the transition went from this scene into the opening credits. So it just all around was great. So I'm not going to disown you. I suppose you're still Eric, but I still question your judgment just a little bit.
All right. And, of course, that only leaves my number 2 spot, which the only one I haven't discussed yet is From Russia with Love. Again, dead Bond in the opening sequence. I'm a sucker for it, evidently. So that ended up being my number 2 spot. We discussed it when you mentioned it at your 10 spot. So just a good, strong, solid opening. Really enjoyed it, and it really led into a good, solid, quality film as well.
All right, so Eric's into Bond. Dead Bond. Yes, he's a necro.
As long as I know he's not actually dead. That's the thing. It's got to be the pre-title. I don't want to see him die in the middle of the movie, because then I'm like, whoa, did they actually...
So what about Undead Bond?
Oh, The Walking Bond. No, I don't know.
James Bond, vampire. If you've ever read Ken Newman's Anno Dracula series, by the way, that does happen. And that's also one of those series where Blofeld's cat is actually the boss.
Well, if you're going to have Vampire Bond, you might as well have cat henchman or cat boss of Spectre. So that works.
Yeah, so that does it for our list of pre-title sequences, our opening acts. Any final thoughts on those?
No, I'm looking forward very much to the next film. I'm hoping that they continue the tradition, because even though they ranked very sporadically on my list, the 3 most recent films have all had strong openings. And I hope they continue that. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do, how they play it with the new characters that they have access to now, if that's even going to be a part of this film or not. And I think this opening sequence that we see, it could really set the stage for the rest of the franchise, and I'm looking forward to it. So I hope they continue on the trend that they started with Casino Royale, and make some good, strong, solid opening sequences to really get people sucked in.
Indeed. But that's going to do it for our current discussion of the opening sequences of the 007 movies. We hope you've enjoyed that. And we also hope that if you have any thoughts, any questioning of our judgment, or any support of somebody's questioning of somebody else's judgment, or vice versa, you would get a hold of us. You can email me directly at ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com. You can also hit me up on Twitter at CinemaOTR.
I'm available by email at eric@foureyedradio.com, or you can also hit me up on Twitter at EricJDewey. Don't forget to follow our show page on Twitter, which is at Her Majesty's Pod. We're also on Facebook.com/HerMajesties.Pod. And, of course, our website, HerMajesties.Pod.com. And don't forget to enter our contest over there. Go to HerMajesties.Pod.com/contest and enter our Holiday Returns contest to win a fabulous pack of prizes.
Again, you have until the end of the day on Thursday, November 27th, 2014. So please visit our page, HerMajesties.Pod.com/contest, and enter to win. But that's going to do it for this episode. We hope you will catch us next time for another episode of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And you have been listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on The Fern.
Hey, you'll listen to another show on the 4-Odd Radio Network. For more shows, you can go and check out 4oddradio.com. How they say?